Good evening and welcome to the Dole Institute of Politics. My name is Nolan Bry and I am a member of the Dole Institute Student Advisory Board, the official student group of the Institute. The Student Advisory Board is a bipartisan group whose members can access many great opportunities through their involvement with the Institute, including volunteering at programs and networking with our special guests. If you are a student and would like to join, please contact us by emailing dolesab@ku.edu or speaking with a student worker after the program. This program is part of our 2016 Civic Engagement and KU Leadership Focus on Campus, which includes a variety of events and programs put on by various KU organizations. The main focus for this year is voter registration for KU students, which is exemplified by the presence of voter registration tables in front of Wesco, Mrs. E's, and the Office of Multicultural Affairs. We are excited about the high volume of student participation this year and hope that you will take advantage of this period, which will be going on through October 19th. After the presentation, we will have some time for the audience to ask questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand and a student worker with a microphone will come to you. Please stand if you are able and ask just one brief question. If you have difficulty hearing during the program, please alert one of our staff members or student volunteers who will assist you. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you to please turn off your cell phones. And now, please join me in welcoming Associate Director of the Dole Institute, Dr. Barbara Ballard.
Thank you, Nolan. Well, good evening and welcome to this evening's program, 10 Greatest Moments in Televised Presidential Debate History. Before I go on with the introductions, I would like you to just turn to the back of your program quickly. And I just want to point out a few things in case, just to let you know. Toss out the playbook. It is an extremely popular discussion group with Stephen Kraske. So if you haven't been here, I would say, please come, but come early. Because last week they couldn't all get in the room, okay? Then the Fort Leavenworth series, the Anglo-Irish War, and I'm sure many of you have tickets already to the Capitol Steps, of which we are one of the sponsors at the Lead Center on October the 8th. Tonight's program will be conducted by Dole Institute of Politics Director Bill Lacey, and tonight's guests are both professors with academic focuses in political communications. Dr. Mary Banwart is an associate professor in the Department of Communication Studies at the University of Kansas. Her primary research focuses on political campaign communication and the influence of gender in political campaigns. Dr. Mitchell McKinney is a communications professor at the University of Missouri, but before you go, ooh, I want you to know he is a Jayhawk. His research interests include presidential debates, political campaigns, civic engagement, and media and politics. It is with great pleasure that we welcome here this evening, and I would ask you to please give a warm welcome to Mary Banwart and Dr. Mitchell McKinney.
Mary, Mitchell, thanks for joining us tonight. Can you guys take a moment just to describe kind of how you went about putting together your set of 10 highlights to show tonight?
Well, when Bill asked us to come up with 10 moments, I said, well, that's going to be hard. And then certainly in terms of the top 10, you'll see in a bit, we're going to go somewhat chronologically, and then you can, as you watch and listen, decide, well, I think that moment was perhaps more important than that moment, or that moment, that zinger was even funnier than the previous zinger. But certainly as we look back to the history of presidential debates from 1960 forward, there have been many consequential statements, exchanges between candidates, and moments that we can look to that we remember. So we're going to highlight several of those tonight, and particularly with Mary's expertise in women in politics. We consulted, and she probably has something to say in terms of some of the clips that we selected tonight as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's get started. We have our first clip from 1960, and I'm going to ask you guys to, introduce it a little bit, and then we'll play it, and then have you comment further on
Good.
it.
As you think about the top moments in presidential debate history, we hear a lot of the 1960 Kennedy-Nixon debate. This was the first time that our general election presidential candidates met on the debate stage to debate one another. And there were 4 of those debates. I selected this moment that you'll see in just a bit. It was the very first question in the very first televised presidential debate. I want you to listen to, we're going to hear more from Senator Kennedy than we do from Vice President Nixon, but I want you to listen to the interaction in this debate. I'll come back to it as we end the program tonight and have you think about perhaps some of the evolution in how our candidates debate one another, address one another. And then also, be sure and watch closely. You'll see Nixon a couple of times in this debate. Good.
The first question to Senator Kennedy from Mr. Fleming. Senator, the Vice President in his campaign has said that you are naive and at times immature. He has raised the question of leadership. On this issue, why do you think people should vote for you rather than the Vice President?
Well, the Vice President and I came to the Congress together in 1946. We both served in the Labor Committee. I've been there now for 14 years, the same period of time that he has, so that our experience in government is comparable. Secondly, I think the question is, what are the programs that we advocate? What is the party record that we lead? I come out of the Democratic Party, which in this century has produced Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman, and which supported and sustained these programs which I've discussed tonight. Mr. Nixon comes out of the Republican Party. He was nominated by it. And it is a fact that through most of these last 25 years, the Republican leadership has opposed federal aid for education, medical care for the aged, development of the Tennessee Valley, development of our natural resources. I think Mr. Nixon is an effective leader of his party. I hope he would grant me the same. The question before us is, which point of view and which party do we want to lead the United States?
Mr. Nixon, would you like to comment on that statement?
I have no comment.
The next question. The first question to...
Now, one of the things we know Don Hewitt has written and talked about these debates, this was Don Hewitt of 60 Minutes fame, the producer of the first of the Kennedy-Nixon debates, that Mr. Nixon arrived late. He hit his knee getting out of the car. This was an injury that he'd had previously. He was not in a good mood, Don Hewitt says. He didn't really appear to enjoy being there that night. And of course, I think you even saw some of that in just that clip. And then too, we've heard in terms of our debate lore since that 1960 debate, the difference of those watching the debate versus listening to the debate on radio. Those listening, many thought that Nixon did pretty well, but those watching came away thinking, no, he probably didn't. He didn't do himself very well in that first debate.
Okay.
We then fast forward to...
This is one of the more fascinating ones, and probably one of the most egregious mistakes ever made in a presidential debate.
The 1976 clip.
Yeah.
Right. We fast forward to 1976. Now, we fast forward because we did not have debates in 64, 68, and 72. After candidates saw, particularly the sitting president, Lyndon Johnson, and then Richard Nixon, who was a candidate after that, after candidates saw the power of debates in 1960, and particularly candidates who felt that they were not that telegenic, perhaps would not do so well on the debate stage, there had to be an act of Congress to suspend federal communications laws in 1960 to allow the debate to happen. That's when we had equal time provisions. In 1964, 1968, and 1972, the parties' candidates did not want a suspension of the laws, did not want debates. Finally, we got to 1976, and both candidates at the top of the ticket, we saw a vice presidential clip earlier in the reception. Those vice presidents had more experience in government than their presidential counterparts that we're going to see here in 1976. Both candidates wanted debates because they felt like they needed to establish themselves. There was some question about their wisdom, their government experience. We're going to hear from a president who was never elected to the office. And as Bill said, there was a gaffe, there was a mistake in that debate that polling data shows really did hurt the incumbent president. We'll hear that one now.
There is no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe, and there never will be under a Ford administration.
I'm sorry, could I just follow? Did I understand you to say, sir, that the Russians are not using Eastern Europe as their own sphere of influence and occupying most of the countries there and making sure with their troops that it's a communist zone, whereas on our side of the line, the Italians and the French are still flirting with
I don't believe, Mr. Frankel, that the Yugoslavians consider themselves dominated by the Soviet Union. I don't believe that the Romanians consider themselves dominated by the Soviet Union. I don't believe that the Poles consider themselves dominated by the Soviet Union. Each of those countries is independent, autonomous. It has its own territorial integrity. And the United States does not concede that those countries are under the domination of the Soviet Union.
You know, Bill, we look back at some polling data. We're now fascinated with polls and tracking polls daily. We had polling data in 1976, and it was not as quick as the snap polls that happened immediately after the debates. Yet, 2-3 days after the debate, we started to see Gerald Ford's public support drop. Much of that was after media commentary pointing out this gaffe. A lot of the viewing public really didn't pick up on it. And that's a moment in that debate where it was rather close, but Ford started to lose ground and never made up again in terms of his 1976 race.
Yeah, and if I can interject here, I know that we've had guests from both the Ford campaign and the Carter campaign, and they both, on both sides, said that this event at this debate may have completely killed Ford's, or at least slowed down Ford's momentum, and probably cost him the presidency.
Right.
On the flip side of that, though, does that also demonstrate really the importance of debates
Well,
from your standpoint?
I think it can show that debates can be consequential, that if a gaffe occurs in a tight race, we usually think that debates can have an effect if the race is tight, if the numbers of undecideds are larger than the margin at the time the debate occurs, much like the conditions we see this year. In terms of a race that has been even lately tightening, still a large number of undecideds, folks that seem to be uncomfortable with either committing to one of the two major party candidates or just not sure. And it's in those moments that a strong debate performance can help and a poor debate performance can really hurt.
Okay, let's go to the next clip, which is from the 80 debate.
I think the next couple of clips Bill will be able to weigh in on with some personal knowledge of these candidates. The 1980 clip.
Governor Reagan, as a matter of fact, began his political career campaigning around this nation against Medicare. Now we have an opportunity to move toward national health insurance with an emphasis on the prevention of disease, an emphasis on outpatient care, not inpatient care, an emphasis on hospital cost containment to hold down the cost of hospital care for those who are ill, an emphasis on catastrophic health insurance, so that if a family is threatened with being wiped out economically because of a very high medical bill, then the insurance would help pay for it. These are the kind of elements of a national health insurance important to the American people. Governor Reagan, again, typically is against such a proposal.
Governor, there you go again. When I opposed Medicare, there was another piece of legislation meeting the same problem before the Congress. I happened to favor the other piece of legislation and thought that it would be better for the senior citizens and provide better care than the one that was finally passed. I was not opposing the principle of providing care for them. I was opposing one piece of legislation versus another.
Well,
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, I'm sure you noticed this debate, Ronald Reagan's sort of mastery, the great communicator, we typically see an incumbent president who's on the debate stage as being the more positive, as being the more energetic. Again, they've been in office. Jimmy Carter, in that one debate with Ronald Reagan, just a week out from the election, Carter refused to debate Reagan. John Anderson, an independent candidate, was in the race that year. He wouldn't debate Reagan with Anderson, but he and his handlers, Carter's handlers, finally saw just about a week out from the election, well, we've got to do a Hail Mary here because we think we're going to lose it anyway, agreed to one debate. For quite some time, that debate held the record for viewership. 81 million folks tuned in that night. And what they heard was a rather pessimistic incumbent president. And they saw a challenger who was full of shining city on a hill, things can be better. You saw Reagan there enjoying himself much more so than the incumbent president.
Okay, let's go to the next clip from 1984.
Mr. Truitt, your question to President Reagan.
Mr. President, I want to raise an issue that I think has been lurking out there for 2 or 3 weeks and cast it specifically in national security terms. You already are the oldest president in history, and some of your staff say you were tired after your most recent encounter with Mr. Mondale. I recall yet that President Kennedy had to go for days on end with very little sleep during the Cuba Missile Crisis. Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances?
Not at all, Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience. If I still have time, I might add, Mr. Truitt, I might add that it was Seneca or it was Cicero, I don't know which, that said, if it was not for the elders correcting the mistakes of the young, there would be no state.
Mr. President, I'd like to head for the fence and try to catch that one before it goes over, but I'll go on to...
Yeah, some of you may have been here about 10 years ago. Did anybody here in the Dole Institute about 10 years ago when we hosted Vice President Mondale? Wow, okay, nobody. Oh, 2 or 3, excellent. I ask if you, and I meant to actually say this up front, but if you saw Vice President Mondale when President Reagan makes that comment about his opponent's youth and inexperience, he is laughing very heartily at it. So when Vice President Mondale was here, I said, you know, Mr. Vice President, I've always wondered about that moment. As soon as President Reagan, you know, told his line, you're laughing very openly at the podium. And I said to him, were you laughing because you thought it was a funny joke, a funny one-liner? Or were you laughing because you knew the president had just hit a walk-off home run and that the election was over? And he looked at me without missing a beat and said, Bill, I laughed because it's the only thing I could do to keep from crying. He said, I knew the election was over in that moment. So,
You know, Bill, that was the second debate of that series. The first debate, Reagan-Mondale debate, many felt that Ronald Reagan came to it too scripted. He had prepared too much. He was full of facts and figures. Again, he had been in office 4 years and didn't deliver one of his characteristic Reagan deliveries. It wasn't having fun, having a good time, the sort of laughter that we saw there. And so he came back, rebounded in that second debate, but certainly, and I think this is the brilliance of Ronald Reagan, his handlers said, okay, you may be asked a question about your age because of your first debate performance. And Reagan had the ability to anticipate, unlike many other political candidates on the debate stage, but not appear scripted. It was so natural, even to the point where he took a drink of water and then he had a quote, Cicero or Quintilian or whoever, and it just flowed so naturally for him. And I do think that there is a lot of evidence that in that moment, he repaired any damage that had been done in that first debate.
Yeah, I had access to the Reagan campaign tracking, and after that very first debate, as I recall, the margin was at 18 for Reagan, and over a period of about 4 days dropped to 9, or about half that. And then once this debate was held, the margin went right back, and then Reagan won and carried 49 states. So let's go to another very famous one from '88, I believe. Is that correct?
That's
88?
right. 88, and if we said that Reagan had the ability to anticipate and deliver, other candidates simply sometimes don't seem to have the ability to anticipate questions and deliver quite well. So this clip.
The first question goes to Governor Dukakis. You have 2 minutes to respond. Governor, if Kitty Dukakis were raped and murdered, would you favor an irrevocable death penalty for the killer?
No, I don't, Bernard, and I think you know that I've opposed the death penalty during all of my life. I don't see any evidence that it's a deterrent, and I think there are better and more effective ways to deal with violent crime. We've done so in my own state, and it's one of the reasons why we have had the biggest drop in crime of any industrial state in America, why we have the lowest murder rate of any industrial state in America.
Do you want to explain why that was so
problematic
for him?
I think a couple of things going on here. One, and we hear this a lot of candidates today, particularly in the television era, and particularly on the debate stage. Do they have the ability to project an image? And Mary's done some work on candidate images that is caring, likable, or are they too cold, full of facts, policy wonkish? And we see all of that coming together in this moment. I would also add, and we've had a lot of folks critique the journalists and the moderator's role in these debates. That's certainly a very noted storyline in the current debate series of how should you interrogate these candidates? Are you doing it sensationalist in terms of how you frame your questions? You know, some said, well, it's Bernie Shaw asking an inappropriate question about this guy's wife being raped and murdered. Or do we see a candidate that simply seems to revert to crime statistics in his home state and not showing any concern for his wife? It really fleshed out a narrative for Michael Dukakis, who had this image problem, if you will, of just not connecting with the voters.
I think Susan Estridge, who worked on his campaign, said after the fact, this was a question about values and emotions, and he responded with policy. And you have to wonder to what extent, really, Reagan set the bar for being able to be personable and show personality in a debate that tends to be really about policy and back and forth, and yet with Reagan, we got to see who he was as a human being, and therefore begin to develop that expectation of we still want to see the candidates for who they are as humans, not just policy wonks and politicians. And Dukakis violated that expectation. If he would have at least acknowledged what a terrible tragedy that would be or how devastated he would be, that would have helped a lot, and most of the critique afterwards suggested so. At this point, though, we really are only seeing a gender gap, which we hear a lot about today, emerge in 1980. Actually, women were split between Nixon, even with what you saw with the Kennedy-Nixon debate. But here, women end up splitting between Reagan and Dukakis. And so they're not even sure what to do, where in at least the past 2 election cycles, in fact, it was Richard Wirthlin, who you worked with, that identified the gender gap for the first time. We see that go away in terms of women's support.
Can either of you conceive of a question like that being asked today?
In a debate. I've done a little consulting with candidates in preparing for debates, and I've come to the line of that there's no such thing as a bad debate question. It's hard to anticipate what a journalist might ask or how they might frame their question. It's all in the answer. Even if it is considered by viewers as inappropriate. And so that is I think that is a challenge for the candidates in terms of anticipating what might be put to them and then how they'll respond.
I was just going to say, I think there were 3 other women on that panel. Is that correct? At least 2
Yes.
other women on that panel with him. They asked him not to ask the question, and he still asked.
Fascinating.
There could be, Mary's point's well taken, there could be many ways to ask a candidate their position on the death penalty than framing it in the context of your wife being raped and murdered. It may go to the rise of the sensationalist journalist era, the rise of cable, the cable news networks. We were in the 80s. This was one of the cable news network anchors.
Okay. So we have the next one.
1992.
I think it's fitting that we're on the campus of a university tonight. These young people, when they get out of this wonderful university, will have difficulty finding a job. We've got to clean this mess up, leave this country in good shape, and pass on the American dream to them. We've got to collect the taxes to do it. If there's a fairer way, I'm all ears.
So certainly Ross Perot, and there's, I think, many ways we could look at the 1992 debate series as historic, but Ross Perot provided some levity throughout that campaign, some drama. He was in the race, out of the race, back in the race. Will he be on the debate stage? The only time in our history of presidential debates that a third independent party candidate was admitted to the debate stage with the 2 major party candidates. At that time, the Debate Commission was using its same rule that it continues to use. And many argue, well, it's too high, 15% threshold. So we didn't see Gary Johnson or Jill Stein on the debate stage in this cycle. But there was, Perot met the 15% threshold at the time of the debates, and he was included. And there were several instances. I even quibbled about, there were some, his vice presidential running mate, Admiral Stockdale, who was in the vice presidential debates, provided some humor and levity in that debate. Oftentimes he wasn't intentionally trying to provide humor or levity. And so then the question in that 1992 series, particularly with Perot's inclusion in the debate, what impact did he have on the outcome? Or did he have an impact on the outcome of the election? Did he pull more voters from George Herbert Walker Bush and give the election to Clinton? And there have been studies on both sides. No, he pulled evenly. Or studies showed, yes, he did pull more from George Herbert Walker Bush and therefore perhaps tilting the election to Bill Clinton. What we do know is that he had the 15% going into the debate, and he did himself well in the sense of he ended up taking little less than 20% in the overall election. It was about 19.5%. So he didn't fade away from his debate performance in 1992.
Okay, let's go on to the next one.
2000. This one, I had to put some things together to illustrate the totality of this debate.
We welcome the 2 candidates, Governor Bush and Vice President Gore.
Jim, if I could just
quick, and we need to move on. Yes, sir.
I know that.
Well, let me just say that obviously tonight we're going to hear some phony numbers.
If I could respond to that, Jim, under my plan, I will put Medicare in an ironclad lockbox.
Let me say something. Now, I understand.
Excuse me,
Jim,
our 3.5 minutes is up, but we'll finish this.
Can I make one other point?
Wait a minute. That's just totally false. Wait a minute. It's just totally false for him to stand up here and say that. Let me make sure the seniors hear me loud and clear.
If I just briefly, Jim, I know.
In an environmentally friendly way.
Well, can I have the last word on this?
New question.
Of course.
Okay,
New
go ahead.
question.
If I could say
All
one
right,
other
we're way
thing about
over the
that.
3.5 minutes. Go ahead.
In a lockbox.
1 minute.
Man's practicing fuzzy math again.
Can I have a rebuttal here?
Sure, but I just want to see if he buys that.
No, let me just tell you what the facts are.
Let me call your attention
This
to it.
man's been disparaging my plan with all this Washington fuzzy math.
Move
It's
on.
an illusion.
Well, wait a minute.
30 seconds, Governor. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. First of all,
Can I comment on that?
You may.
I cannot let this go by.
If I could respond, Jim.
I can't let the man continue with fuzzy math.
In a lockbox.
Fuzzy math.
Could I respond to that, Jim?
Do,
This is a big
almost,
issue. This is a big issue. Could we do another round on it? Lockbox.
Fuzzy math.
Lockbox.
Fuzzy math.
Lockbox.
Fuzzy math.
Lockbox.
Fuzzy math.
Could we do another round on it?
Fuzzy
Box.
Fuzzy
Box.
Fuzzy
Box.
Fuzzy
Box. Could we do another round on it?
we have to stop here.
Okay. Now,
I think Mitchell got a little carried away on that one, don't you?
you know, I saw, actually, it was a content analysis that we did that I'll get the numbers wrong, but Gore actually beat Bush in terms of the use of the phrase lockbox. It was more than 24 times. Bush came in, and I think it was 17 times uttering the phrase fuzzy math that night. Now, we heard a lot about interruptions a week and a half or so ago in the debate that we just saw. Vice President Gore was seen that night as always needing to have the last word, as always needing to correct his opponent. Again, here's another instance. He went into that debate series leading somewhat George W. Bush. And as the three debates progressed, at each point, the tracking polls had Gore losing ground, in terms of his debate performance. Again, we could talk about some of the image characteristics of, he wanted you to know that he was the smartest guy on the stage and had all the facts and figures and needed to correct his opponent, and he did that constantly throughout the debate.
And I do think that is, though, one of the challenges that the candidates, again, are facing, because we want the differentiation, we want the contrast, and we want to understand that they're different on the issues, but there comes a point where they cross a line, at least on our image scales, and they cross a line between becoming too overbearing, too teachy, and most of our citizens say, I'd still like to sit down and have a conversation with whoever my presidential candidate is. I want them to be smarter than I am, but I don't want them to school me, and I don't want them to teach me. I still want to have a conversation. So there's that turn-off factor.
Okay. We try not to talk about this as much on a college campus, but Bill, you've heard this in terms of your polling. For the average citizen, sometimes it's, could I just sit down and have a beer with this guy? Could I just shoot the breeze, and do I feel comfortable? Would I feel comfortable? And it's that type of persona that is often being developed, while at the same time we still expect some level of intellect.
That particular debate really spawned a great Saturday Night Live. And by the way, I think probably, arguably, at least from my perspective, and the Dole Institute's perspective, the most memorable Saturday Night Live was done in 1988 with Dan Aykroyd playing Bob Dole. And it's actually part of the museum here. If you go back and you touch the screen, the last screen there, it has that section of the Republican debate, which is really quite hilarious. So let's move on to the next one.
And speaking of Saturday Night Live, I think this is a good one to move on to.
I say it ain't so, Joe. There you go again, pointing backwards again, though. You prefaced your whole comment with the Bush administration. Now, doggone it, let's look ahead and tell Americans what we have to plan to do for them in the future. You mentioned education, and I'm glad that you did. I know that education you are passionate about, and with your wife being a teacher for 30 years, and God bless her, her reward is in heaven, right? I say, too, with education, America needs to be putting a lot more focus on that, and our schools have got to be really ramped up in terms of the funding that they are deserving. Teachers needed to be paid more. I come from a house full of school teachers. My grandma was. My dad, who's in the audience today, he's a school teacher, had been for many years. My brother, who I think is the best school teacher in the year, and there's a shout out to all those third graders at Gladyswood Elementary School. You get extra credit for watching this debate.
Now that wasn't a Saturday Night Live clip. And it is easy to confuse. I'm going to say something about the historic nature that I know Mary's got some work that she's done in terms of the gender and politics. And here we have another one, our second female on the vice presidential debate stage. That debate was the only time in presidential debate history that a vice presidential debate drew more viewers than the top of the ticket presidential debate. And it held the record as the third, after first Kennedy-Nixon, the 81 million, Reagan-Carter, one single debate, and then this came in third. The only time that a vice presidential debate drew more viewers than the top of the ticket. And the top of the ticket that year wasn't a snoozer, right? We had Barack Obama and John McCain. And I asked my students this. I said, what happened? What produced that large viewing audience? I heard someone say Tina Fey. The parody of, yes, and they probably were not tuning in that night to see Joe Biden. It was to see Sarah Palin, and particularly I think the way that entertainment media had framed her, the expectations that had been set for that debate, to see would we have an amusing comical show that evening.
And I think watching Saturday Night Live and not overruling or sort of tossing out the idea that those don't matter, because I think arguably they do, and certainly in this election cycle they did. And I would argue, though, that it's an issue about credibility. And that what they did was they attacked her credibility. They didn't just make fun of her for making fun of her, but they took something that had grains of truth in it from her performances, and they really went after her credibility. So I would encourage you to look at the Saturday Night Live clips that they're doing right now to see how they're actually parroting the candidates and the ways in which they're presenting them, and where does the credibility angle come from, or the ability to attack credibility. It won't surprise you that no one thought she won the debate. CNN's poll, 51% thought Biden won. CBS poll, 46%. Even Fox News had 61% saying that Biden won. She was criticized, of course, for being soft in her answers, not being sort of crisp and clear. In examples like this, she wandered off and completely got off topic and just simply didn't answer the question at all. Very historic moment for putting a woman on the stage, obviously, but in terms of delivery on her performance, the voters expected something still very different. And I would offer one more comment on this. I do think that she changed the type of language and the communication style that a certain type of female politician can use. And certainly female politicians who are more toward the right, as she is. I think it can be more folksy and more down home, which is really what characterizes her style, and she kind of exacerbated that and played that up. But they can be a lot more aggressive in a way that female candidates who really sit on any other part of the spectrum can't quite be, because it is cloaked in this folksy, down home style. But she really brought that to the forefront in this particular debate.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
Governor Romney, pay equity for women.
Thank you, and important topic, and one which I learned a great deal about, particularly as I was serving as governor of my state, because I had the chance to pull together a cabinet, and all the applicants seemed to be men. And I went to my staff and I said, how come all the people for these jobs are all men? They said, well, these are the people that have the qualifications. And I said, well, gosh, can't we find some women that are also qualified? And so we took a concerted effort to go out and find women who had backgrounds that could be qualified to become members of our cabinet. I went to a number of women's groups and said, can you help us find folks? And they brought us whole binders full of women. I was proud of the fact that after I staffed my cabinet and my senior staff, that the University of New York in Albany did a survey of all 50 states and concluded that mine had more women in senior leadership positions than any other state in America.
Now, Bill, you mentioned earlier the intersection of entertainment media and real politics on the debate stage, Saturday Night Live spoofs of candidates, and then the Sarah Palin debate where there was history made with the number of viewership, where entertainment media was driving people to the real debate, wanting to see what kind of show would be put on. This moment, Mitt Romney in the 2012 debate, his binders full of women moment. Now, I see several heads shaking. Yes, we remember that phrase. It actually, in the totality of that 90-minute debate, wasn't that memorable. He was on topic. He was asked a question about the appointment of women to government positions, and he made the phrase that someone brought in binders full of women. Within 90 seconds of those words leaving his mouth, the domain name bindersfullofwomen.com had been secured by a PAC group opposed to Mitt Romney, and that website was populated with attack information on his record in terms of appointing women to positions. Again, 90 seconds. Now, a large segment of those of us watching debates today, we're second screening it. We're media multitasking, right? I can't pull mine out right now. I've turned it off. I've got it in my pocket. We're watching the Twitter feed. We're posting Facebook posts. We're commenting. The candidates now know that any statement they make may become the next viral video, the next viral meme, and in 90 seconds, whether it's killing Big Bird, which was also uttered in that debate series, or horses and bayonets, this was an Obama line to Mitt Romney, or binders full of women. And we continue to see that in terms of the force of social media and debates. I study what my students are doing. I study other audiences of how we engage the debate message. It is much different than what was happening in 1960. And I think for the consultants and handlers of these candidates in the wings listening to, as the words come out of their mouth, this is going to be the next, as I say, the memification, the viral video that we start to see. And that certainly happened in 2012.
I would add, it still has its own Wikipedia page, Binders Full of Women. And a couple of things, right? When we talk about candidates prepping, they have their message. Even if you're given a question that's not quite on your message, you answer, transition, and get back on your message. It's all about your message. And this really forced Romney to answer a series, and he didn't end up developing it very well, but begin to answer questions he wasn't prepared to answer and talk about things he wasn't prepared to talk about. He had to talk about and begin to deal with the fact that during his term in office, he actually had a decreased representation of women, certainly at the executive level. There were questions that started to come up about the Ledbetter Equal Pay Act and why if he was so supportive of binders full of women, why wouldn't he support this act? So it really shifted that set of issues that he had to address, and not in a way that he was particularly comfortable or prepared. And it was in 2015 that he came back around and he said, I absolutely wish that I would have said that differently. He said it came out in a way that I didn't mean it, and if I could take it back, I would.
Okay. We have one more, is that right?
One more to round out 10 moments. We decided to end with a moment from our most recent debate series. As you're watching and listening to this, I said to Bill and Mary earlier, I see somewhat of bookends. Think back to what we started with in 1960. And Richard Nixon, John Kennedy, that debate. And then what we're seeing and hearing, what took place a week or so ago in this clip from the 2016 Clinton-Trump debate.
This is a man who has called women pigs, slobs, and dogs, and someone who has said pregnancy is an inconvenience to employers, who has said women don't deserve equal pay unless they do as good a job as men. And one of the worst things he said was about a woman in a beauty contest. He loves beauty contests, supporting them and hanging around them. And he called this woman Miss Piggy. Then he called her Miss Housekeeping because she was Latina. Donald, she has a name.
Where did you find
Her
this?
name
Where
is
did you find
Alicia
this?
Machado.
Where did you find
And
this?
she has become a U.S. citizen, and you can bet she's going to vote this November.
Okay, good. Let me just tell you.
Mr. Trump, if you could take 10 seconds, and then we're going to have a final question.
Hillary is hitting me with tremendous commercials. Some of it said in entertainment. Some of it said somebody who's been very vicious to me, Rosie O'Donnell. I said very tough things to her, and I think everybody would agree that she deserves it, and nobody feels sorry for her. But you want to know the truth? I was going to say something extremely rough to Hillary, to her family, and I said to myself, I can't do it. I just can't do it. It's inappropriate. It's not nice. But she spent hundreds of millions of dollars on negative ads on me, many of which are absolutely untrue. They're untrue and they're misrepresentations. And I will tell you this, Lester, it's not nice, and I don't deserve that. But it's certainly not a nice thing that she's done. It's hundreds of millions of ads, and the only gratifying thing is I saw the polls come in today, and with all of that money, over $200 million is spent, and I'm either winning or tied, and I've spent practically nothing.
Now, actually, if you remember that first clip that we saw this evening, Senator Kennedy, at one point, praised his opponent. I think he used the word, I think he's an effective leader of his party, and I hope he would grant me the same. You watch, and by the way, this clip was selected because I went back and I looked at the analytics. This was the moment that was the most replayed after the debate in all of the media reporting. But you certainly come away from this, and I know Mary's got some insight in terms of the attack of women, the gender issue in this debate. You certainly come away from this with the realization that these two candidates just do not like each other. There is little regard that they have for one another. I could say, I think I said earlier, it may not be too strong a word that they hate each other. And as I bookended the 1960 moment with this moment, and Bill asked, and I said, you know, that is a very good question. What does it say about our democracy in terms of our candidates' interactions with one another now on the debate stage?
So one of the things, if we go back just for a moment to Sarah Palin's VP debate and really just that election cycle, I think it's proof of what we all knew, but we have really great tangible proof at the executive level that women will not just vote for a woman because she's on the ticket, period. But when this kind of an attack and the way that it's delivered happens in the way that this happened, you're going to start to see a shift because there are too many women who've experienced that same type of a communication style or they've seen it happen and they won't stand for it. We have a lot of sociologists and psychologists right now who study language and really abusive uses of language. And this mimics that, the power over style, the way that he shushed the moderator, the way he tried to overtalk her and try to demand that she respond to him as she's delivering her story. If it made you uncomfortable, you're not the only person out there who felt really uncomfortable during the debate based on polling data and a lot of anecdotal reporting data. But we are seeing the gender shift, and actually Hillary had this happen, something very similar to her in her Senate debate with Rick Lazio, where he walked across the debate stage with a piece of paper, and I would have thought they might have taken a bit of a cue from that, and he shoved it in her face, and she was struggling with the women's vote at that point in her Senate campaign, and he shoved it in her face and he demanded that she sign it on the spot, and women said, done. We're not going to have any of that, and they flocked over to support Hillary Clinton. Right now, what our polling data suggests is that they're seeing the exact same thing take place here, and it's much of a stand against you don't treat women that way publicly, period.
Okay. I have one more question, then we're going to open it up to your questions and answers, but I'd like to ask you both a question. It seems to me, historically, that the more decisive debates occurred back, you know, in 60 and 76 and 80 and 84, and they're just not as decisive anymore. Do you guys believe that to be the case, and if so, why?
I do think, Bill, that there's something to the growing media saturation of where at one time we had the convention period, and the conventions were dominant when we had the 3 networks, and it was all the conventions all the time. And then we kicked off the fall campaign and we got to the debates. But now it's not a 24-hour news cycle. As I said, it's a second-by-second cycle as words are coming out of the candidate's mouth, whether on the stump or wherever they are. Social media, entertainment media, all of the forms that we're bombarded with daily, it does diminish somewhat the impact of what could be a decisive debate. Still, though, we see with the 84 million that tuned in a week ago, that they have the power, debates have the power to generate these large audiences, and then there may be moments that will be remembered and can be consequential in the election.
Wouldn't you say it's really fair to say that if a candidate doesn't debate in today's political climate, it's just going to be unacceptable to the voters?
No, I do. So we have no law. There is no law in effect that forces our candidates to debate. It's by a force of precedent, and they have become institutionalized, where even, and we saw this in 1996 with the Dole Clinton debates, where Clinton had a sizable margin, but at one point there was some taunting of, they ended up with 2 debates. At one point, the incumbent president said, I'll do one, but said, oh, what's wrong, you know? Are you scared to debate? I don't think that we could have a candidate today, no matter how popular, that would be able to refuse to stand and debate their opponent.
So no more Lyndon Johnson or Richard Nixon ducks on debates.
I don't see that happening. I think it would be too disastrous for the candidate.
Yeah. Okay. Let's open it up to your questions and answers. Hold up your hand. One of these gentlemen with a microphone will come by and get you. And we have somebody right over here too. So hold up your hand, sir, over here so Keller can find you.
Thank you so much for your wonderful talk. I was interested in what you thought about the question about humor. So seeing the difference between humor as it was played in 1960s through the 80s, or 70s, 80s, 90s, and to today, do we see a change in humor being taken as something apolitical, i.e. you can be just funny? You know, is Reagan seen as he's just a funny guy, he's humorous, and now Trump or Clinton even being seen as they might be funny to an extent, but the funniness is only taken politically. So humor being taken up into sort of a sprawling politicalization of different aspects of language. Does that make sense? Maybe I'll put it a different way. I'll also put it a different way. The humor in debates or in political speeches in the 1960s, is that humor of a different type than the humor being used today? I.e., is that humor back then meant to be more for, I'm a candidate, I'm trying to be personal with you, and now the humor is being used as, this is a weapon which I will use to attack the other candidate?
Gotcha.
Okay.
Well, I don't know on the front of humor as weapon or as a partisan ploy. I would say that it can be a dangerous thing for candidates. It seems today, at least, we expect, notwithstanding Mr. Trump's performance a week ago, we expect the candidates to be well rehearsed, well prepared, and of course, you know, the dreaded word, well scripted in these debates. And so when we find those humorous moments, we tend to shake our head and say, well, that was a planned zinger, they rehearsed that line. That, I think, takes some of the impact of the humor away. And I think, too, as I think Bill alluded to it earlier in terms of the Saturday Night Live clips, we don't have to get the humor from the candidates and from the debate stage, because we're going to get it from now all of this attendant media that surrounds the debate.
And I would say, too, it's a very difficult line for candidates to walk. If you're a candidate, I'd be careful about it. Lots of candidates think they're funny, and they're not necessarily very funny. And so the idea of being scripted, Right, we want them scripted because we want to know that they've planned and prepared, but we want it to sound more conversational. And for women, when it comes to humor, that's a super difficult double bind they have to cross. They can't be too funny. It has to be very on topic, preferably a little bit drier sense of humor, because just she has so much difficulty being and establishing herself as, and not just Hillary Clinton here, I mean women in general when they run for office, being credible enough for us to believe that she's going to enact the policy and understands how to enact the policy that we want, that's going to benefit us, and yet we also want her to seem like what we expect from women in our society, warm and caring and nurturing. It's a difficult double bind, and humor can destroy that if it's not, especially for a female candidate, if it's not handled very, very carefully. So it would have to be very on topic and very on focus for her. And I think Hillary Clinton delivered that thus far.
Okay, we have a question over here.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you think it is important for younger generations to study or at least be familiar with past presidential debates, and if so, why?
Good question.
Well, I think it's always important to know our history, and to I hear oftentimes someone make a statement like, "Wow, you know, look what they're talking about," or "Look at this issue," and I say, when we heard some of it tonight in these clips in terms of, was the Carter, the 1980 clip in terms of national health care, and we're still debating these issues decades later. So I do think that it's important that we understand the history, the nation's history and presidential history.
And Dr. McKinney teaches a very popular political debates class, as it should be, because it sets the tone for our civic dialogue, and it's very much part of our civic dialogue. And so I would say yes, and I would hope students would have interest not only in tuning in, but having discussions in their classroom, because any discipline, no matter what their focus is on, can plug into how these debates and these conversations are ultimately going to affect people in that career field, whatever the corporate environment is, nonprofit environment, whatever part of it they are sending those students out into for their future careers. These debates and the commentary and ultimately who we elect and the policies enacted are going to influence our students.
Okay, I have a question back here.
Good evening. My question comes from the sort of instantaneous nature of polling that we have. Do you guys think that the instantaneous polling has changed how candidates prepare for debates? And if it hasn't yet, do you think it will change how they prepare for debates in the future?
By instantaneous polling, do you mean the little graphs that go across the bottom of the debate screen, or just the snapshots we get right after the debate's over?
I was referring to more of the screenshots that we get during the debates.
I think from the data that we often see in these cycles, it does make a difference. And in fact, in the research team that Dr. McKinney is leading that's studying all of the presidential debates with colleges and universities across the country, you're actually asking that they use a screen that doesn't show. And I think what's questionable is we don't always know what is the scientific data behind the little screenshot you've got. We know that if they're using dials, there's a 3-second lag between the moment that dial number is recorded, it hits the master computer that aggregates the data, and then it's kicked up to be shown on the television. There's at minimum a 3-second lag. So I think it can get really confusing, not only who's participating. I think one of the stations that I watched on the last debate was probably through a call-in. And so people were plugged into their website and they were tapping on their computer. So it's not necessarily a scientific sample. And I think that's what's questionable about it. I think it's fascinating, frankly, and we've done some dial groups here that are very structured. So you've got to do the research before you immediately believe.
So everybody's on the same wavelength here. I was thinking about this when you mentioned dials. What are dial groups? Tell everybody.
So many of you might have seen them on television, focus groups often that happen after the debates, and they talk about that they dialed during the debate. They're just a small little square object that the participants will hold in their hand, and they have a dial on it, and they can generally scroll it depending on who's moderating the particular focus group. It can be 0 to 100 or 1 or 2 or 0 to 50, whatever the range is, but they're able to just in real time record what their reaction is to what they're seeing on the screen. And then there's a computer system that aggregates the data, and you've got a graph that says this is what Republicans and Democrats, men and women, are thinking.
Okay. I think we have a question right here, Keller.
Bob Dole was quite witty. In fact, he was pretty funny, although sometimes rather sharp. Do you think that hurt him in his presidential campaign?
Bill, look at you.
I'll let you guys answer. You're the guest.
I do think that, and I'm recalling something that Lyndon Johnson said, that he could be folksy and sort of down home with his humor, but it didn't translate well in terms of television. And I wonder sometimes, it could be Senator Dole, it could be others, where there was someone being rather sarcastic or witty that doesn't translate well. We heard earlier in the reception tonight the Democrat wars comment, where sometimes these offhand comments that might seem witty, it again, in terms of the delivery, it doesn't come across well. I think, going back to what Mary said earlier, that humor for a political candidate can be a very dangerous thing. If it lands well, great. If not, then that's a moment perhaps they wish they had back.
Okay, we have a question back here.
Thanks. I was just wondering, moderators have come under a certain amount of criticism and comment. I mean, it's often a subject of conversation after some of the debates. And I was just wondering if you can think of anything that moderators or organizers can do structurally to make debates more useful to the public.
Yeah. You know, I've said that has become even more difficult. We've had a long history of the candidates who attempt to have as much control over these moments, the debates, as possible. Candidates control so much of our campaign communication. They control their ads, they control their conventions, they control their stump speeches. When it comes to the debate stage, the rules are they show up, they have a blank pad at their podium, and that's it. No teleprompter, no aides speaking into their ears, it's just them. We have the Commission on Presidential Debates currently because previously we had the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters gave up sponsoring debates largely because of their inability to work with the two campaigns. This was in '84 and then it continued in '88, where at one point, I think Nancy Riding said that they started with a list of 100 journalists. They were trying to work with both campaigns, and they couldn't agree on at least 3 or 4 out of that 100 that the campaigns thought were acceptable. And so we continue to hear this, what I call working the refs, that someone's going to be biased or someone's going to be in the camp of my opponent. And so it's a very difficult job. We have had examples, I think we saw one tonight, where sometimes the journalists perhaps wish to make a name for themselves by being the center of attention or sort of a sensational performance as the questioner. And now, of course, in this cycle, we hear a lot about, well, the journalists shouldn't be fact checkers, which, you know, to some point, I sort of throw up my hands and say, well, what is the job of a journalist? And so we have to have some gatekeeper, someone on the stage to try to keep some order, to put questions to the candidates. I think it's going to be a perpetual sort of setting of the expectations. If one feels like I need to call into question the journalist in case I don't do well or something doesn't go right tonight, I can point the finger. And so it is, I don't have answers there. I just suggest it's a very difficult job. And mostly what they get, what the journalists get, when we see one doing a good job, I guess we don't give them a lot of praise. We just pile on those that we think have been unfair to our candidate.
Okay, we have a question back here.
Good evening. My question is more along the lines of the progress of politics. We go back from the 1960s. We can see that debate and how it differs all the way up to 2016. So my overall question is, what is it that changes the debates? What is it that we're seeing that makes the debates be so different from what we've seen in the past? You know, especially within the past 4 years, we've seen a radical change from you know, Trump and Clinton and Obama and Romney?
In terms of structure, we haven't seen a lot of change, but it seems like it's the reaction is where the change happens. And what Dr. McKinney mentioned earlier, so many of you are now, you have all of your devices set up and you're responding immediately. So you're sending out tweets about the debate and you're posting on Facebook what your reaction is and what your opinion is and your observation. And so I think it's the viewing experience that, from at least what research tells us so far, that's where the difference is happening. And you're doing some of that research currently with students who are working on Twitter and tweeting and doing all of that while they're watching the debate and comparing against students who don't, correct?
Yes, so I do think that that is one of the changes in terms of how we engage the debate message. We've seen the evolution of how the, again, as I said, the attendant media fixates on the debate message. The actual encounter, the actual interaction, the debate, is pretty much the same from what we saw in 1960 to what we saw a week ago and what we'll see tomorrow night. Two candidates on the stage, in one instance, three candidates, some moderator or journalist putting questions to the candidate. As I said earlier, it has struck me as someone who's looked at these systematically in terms of doing content analysis of these debates, in terms of the media coverage of these debates. As I've looked, and I've done this several times now over the decades, it does strike me that our candidates really, what they bring to the debate stage is somewhat different in terms of how they treat one another, interact with one another. It is fundamentally different. And I think that speaks to a larger issue in terms of our politics, in terms of how we do politics in this country. This, some have called it polarized politics or hyper-partisan politics of show no regard, little respect for one another because we've got our base to appeal to. And so that clearly, as one looks across the decades, that has changed, and it's reflective on the debate stage.
Okay, we have another question here.
It seems to me like entertainment anymore has become the X factor in politics. It seems like in the 60s and 80s, for a lot of people, politics was more on the boring side. People watched because they needed the information. They needed to learn what the candidates were about. But now, with all the channels on TV, people want entertainment, and maybe this is why they're getting such a large viewing audience for these things, because with Sarah Palin and now with Trump, not knowing what they're going to say next or where they're going to go, it has introduced more entertainment into politics rather than being boring. And I think one of the things too is it's just inherent in some people that they would like to be able to criticize people, but they don't feel like it. But it's okay to watch other people do it, and that's, for a lot of people, entertainment.
Mm-hmm. You know, I say to my students quite often, and as I've written about debates, and Mary has alluded to some of the work that we're doing now with social media, and I call it social watching debates. It was a point in terms of where we were trying to engage particularly younger voters, and these millennial voters now that are an important segment of the electorate. It was something of what I called an eat your spinach message. You should do this. You should care about what's happening in the world. You should tune in, spend 90 minutes, right? I don't know that it's necessarily an entirely bad thing if we have some entertainment value to the debates, to politics, and I'll give a couple examples. One, we haven't talked about the Lincoln-Douglas debates tonight. That would take us way back. We wouldn't have clips to those. Those weren't presidential debates. They were Senate debates. Most of the people that showed up at those 7 debates in Illinois, they debated in each of the 7 congressional districts in Illinois, couldn't hear the debate. They brought a picnic basket. They were playing games while the debate was going on. It was entertainment for them. It was something to do. Now, another bit of evidence, in our studies, those young voters who tweet most often during the debate, and we've looked at the content of their tweets. It is oftentimes to attack or to criticize or to make fun of the candidates, just like our big league media tend to do. But those who tweet most often during the debate score higher on our learning measures. They learn more. And our learning measures are, do they recall, do they understand what was said during the debate? And so for me, there's a bit of evidence that at least while they're engaged in some entertaining commentary, they are paying attention. And it might be that they're actually getting something, remembering something, while they're engaged with the debate. So I don't completely discount. I sometimes sit and listen for 90 minutes and maybe nod off. And so having a little levity, and I enjoy the Saturday Night Live skits as well surrounding these debates.
Okay, I know we've got another question here too, don't we? We have two right here. We'll get both these right here.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the optics of debates and going forward as we see optics changing. You talked about the difference between listening on the radio back in 1960 versus seeing it on television. We've seen with the town hall that's coming up. We've seen how in past town halls there's a personal space sort of bubble around the candidates that can be intruded upon. If you were to advise the candidates coming up on the town hall, what would you say to them from a gendered perspective, as also just a general perspective of what this new discourse looks like? What would your advice be to them?
That one's going to be, I think, very interesting because I'm not 100% sure that plays quite as easily to what Hillary is comfortable with in that type of movement. Certainly it does to her husband, but her husband also studied Ronald Reagan excessively when he prepared to run for office. But it doesn't, and it is going to be different for her, how she engages with the voters, and even how she does or doesn't recognize her opponent, how she moves around the stage and her comfort level moving around the stage. Is she going to look too stiff? I think the image factor with her and how she's critiqued for her image of that town hall debate will be probably just as high as what she ends up saying. And it's because we have different expectations for women. Again, we want them at once to be very warm and nurturing and really engage with us, but we want them to be really smart and on topic and saying the perfect thing at the perfect time. So it's going to be a fascinating double bind for her. But I would, if I were advising her, I would have her work over and over and over to work on getting that comfort level and interacting and engaging and knowing where the cameras are going to be and how those camera angles are going to catch her. Because she's also going to get critiqued for how she sits on the stool and whether it's a stool or whether it's a chair. And then what does she wear? And then really what she wears depends on whether it's a stool or whether it's a chair. So the difference are really palpable when it comes to the gender issue.
Mm-hmm. And you know, there's no models for her to look back to.
Exactly.
In terms of, I would also say too, in the town hall debate, as Mary has suggested, it's a very different dynamic than a podium debate. In the podium debate a week or so ago, we're watching how they interact with one another, how they respond to one another, how they attack one another. Do they maintain some sense of civility or decorum with one another? In the town hall debate, it is all about their ability to connect with, relate to, empathize with, show some identification with that undecided citizen that the Gallup poll will select from the St. Louis area who comes in and asks their questions. And therefore, we have seen in some instances of town hall debates, when the candidates, we saw this with Barack Obama and Mitt Romney 4 years ago, when the candidates decide that they're going to ignore the audience and really take each other on, that strategy becomes very dicey in terms of, is it unseemly before the people, inches away, they're engaged in this brawl. And so it may work against someone, too, that has a penchant for wanting to to engage in a brawl, and doing that in front of we the people, of these citizens that will be standing seated just inches away from them. So on many levels, the dynamics of this town hall, I think, present some interesting challenges to both candidates.
I'm going to guess she won't shimmy.
One of the things that you'd, I'm sure, both agree in terms of advising them is don't do what President Bush did in 1992.
That's right, yes. It's time to get out of here.
Okay, we have another question right here.
To piggyback off that, what kind of improvements would you like to see from both candidates in the future debates coming up pretty soon?
Don't both of you answer at once.
Right. So improvements of the candidates right now. You know, I think one thing I want to reiterate is just a reminder, and all of you all are here because you're really engaged in politics and you get this, right? But so many people I think we just don't think enough about it. What a high bar we have in terms of expectations for these candidates on the stage. And so I was just thinking as we were talking about the town hall, right? They're going to have to appear very warm and friendly, and then Trump threatens that he's going to attack her. Well, if attacking her is what he's going to have to do to get somewhere in the polls, then how is he going to manage that? And with Hillary, how is she going to manage if he does attack her? What is that space going to look like, and those nonverbals going to look like, and how she responds? And the bar is really high, because if nothing else on Saturday Night Live, we're going to find out whether or not they did it well or not. And so I think I guess I will speak just for a moment to Hillary Clinton. I think she's going to have to continue to work very hard to, as those barbs continue to come at her, how she responds to those. Because at some point, and she has enough of a sort of an image that's being created around her about that she's kind of cold, she's kind of aloof, she's a little bit evasive, maybe whether it comes from emails, et cetera. I mean, a variety of different people have a lot of different complaints, right? So making sure that she doesn't feed into some of the worst of those in terms of appearing too cold and aloof. And again, it's that double bind that I keep going back to and harping on with her. But I think she's going to have to work especially hard now through these next two debates, not to appear soft, but also to continue to appear strong and engaging with her public. And especially if Trump implodes, as he did for that moment that we showed and a few other moments, how she handles that in a really credible way that still is respectful of the moment and the debate moment. I think the pressure is going to be on her for that. And as Mitchell said, there's no precedent for a woman in how this is going to be handled, and yet there are millions of us sitting out there who are ready to be critics.
You know, I wonder if the easiest or most effective way for Donald Trump to throw her off her game is to be nice, and she perhaps would know how to respond. I don't advise them. You know, Hillary Clinton is known to be very practiced, very prepared, sort of a steady. We saw this through her primary debates with Bernie Sanders, and there was 2 or 3 others early on, that she turned in consistent performances. And I think that that's really what she needs to do for the next 2 debates, is to turn in strong performances. So we won't see this first one, well, it was sort of a fluke coming out of the gate. I don't know where Donald Trump goes in terms of, well, now, after a first debate that was not seen as him having the strongest performance, does he become more harsh in his attacks? As we said, that's going to be very difficult in that town hall debate to do. Or does he show a more rehearsed, practiced, disciplined debate performance? And then if so, then we probably look at that and say, well, that's not the real Donald Trump. That's not the Donald Trump that we know and love. So I don't know where he goes in terms of the next 2 debates.
Do either of you think that the way that Trump dominated the Republican debates is counterproductive for him now in a general election debate in a one-on-one format?
Yeah, it was a different, with the 10 and 11 candidates on the stage at one time, I think that fit his style much easier in the sense of he dominated those debates because he was getting attacked, and when in the rules of the primary debates, when he got attacked, he got to respond. But he had very short responses. In those short responses, he was able to deliver a quip, a zinger, some self-praise, as opposed to the more sustained responses that we see in the general election debate when it's just one-on-one, two people on the stage. So the primary debates, it may have sort of accustomed him to, okay, my typical style works, and now it's not working so well, or at least in that first debate.
And I think it'll be interesting to hear if he ends up making a change, right? Because he had it all together, he didn't need to prep for the debate. So now that the coverage is out there, the analysis is out there, is he going to change and actually begin to prepare? And if he does, what does that say? And is he willing to carry that, I think some of the comments about the fact that he does now prepare, and he already criticized Hillary for it, so if he shifts and does it, what does that say about who he is and what kind of a candidate he is? And candidly, can his ego handle that kind of evaluation of him? And I don't know that it will. It'll be fascinating. My odds are that he probably won't prepare.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you have any other questions? We have. We're going to take one or two more, and that's it. Right here.
All right. Hi. So I wanted to ask about the primary debates, and I know you just kind of got done talking about them, but I thought there were really two powerful moments for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in the primaries. The first was Donald Trump when he was attacked by Ted Cruz in the Republican primary for having like New York values, and he gave like just an amazing response where he just said, like, he talked about 9/11 and like the coming together after that, and it really made him seem really good in my opinion. And then the sort of artful smears comment that Hillary Clinton made against Bernie Sanders, where she really took a risk and challenged him to like attack her, and she said, instead of doing these artful smears, just like say what you need to say, and he didn't take the bait. So, what moments besides that, either in this primary or in others, do you think were really powerful for candidates?
Well, we could go on a long time with primary debates. It was 4 or 8 years ago. The Democrats now hold the record. They had 27 primary debates in that cycle. I think we were up to about 12 or 13 for the Republicans. One thing that comes to my mind was, of course, the Donald Trump, Megyn Kelly interaction on the debate stage, and then the several days after that played out in the media. And also, I think, and this I believe Donald Trump learned from his reality TV star fame of generating high ratings. We had some of the highest viewership for the Republican primary debates in this cycle than we've ever had for primary debates, because again, folks were wanting to tune in for entertainment. And it usually happened a day or two before the next primary debate. Something was said on the stump about one of the candidates, one of the other Republican candidates, that then drew all the media's attention and drew our attention. Oh, we can't wait to see how they interact with each other on the stage. So that intersection, again, of entertainment and politics was certainly at play in the primary debates.
Okay, do we have one more question? Last chance? And student? A lot of the students here tonight. You guys have a question? Now, wait a minute, Charlie. You had yours. All right, we will let him have the last word.
Well, this really doesn't fall into tonight's topics, but the news has seemed to indicate that the millennials this year might hold the key to who's going to win this election. And yet, we hear from the news that the millennials are not getting what they want to get from the candidates. But I haven't heard from anyone what they want. In your polling, have you been able to determine what it is that the millennials are looking for that apparently they're not getting?
Well, and we were talking earlier this evening that if this race remains close, and that segment of the electorate could hold the key in terms of their turnout. How do they break? Are they the ones that will stay with Johnson and Stein, whether that's 6%, 8%, whatever the total is for the third-party candidates, and then does that number, would that have made a difference in the overall election? In terms of what they want, I mean, one thing that we know about the millennials, and I think this is where Hillary Clinton is feeling the pain, they tend to be very anti-establishment. And that was the Bernie Sanders appeal in terms of this outsider, this insurgent, that he was really fueling his campaign. And of course, someone like Hillary Clinton, who's been, Donald Trump said the other night, 30 years, but certainly a very inside politics candidate. I don't know in terms of then exactly what they want. I think some of the social issues may be keeping them from going to the Trump campaign, Trump side, and it's hard to figure them out in terms of what's driving their decision making, and it certainly seems to be frustrating for the candidates.
Okay, Mary, Mitchell, I want to thank you both. I've been looking forward to this program for several months. As you know, we've been trying to get it organized, and it was outstanding. So thank you both very, very much.
Thank you.
As Barbara mentioned in her opening introductions, we have our discussion group here tomorrow. Next week is fall break, so we will not be having any programs next week, but we'll come back in 2 weeks. We're going to screen a documentary about the United States' place in the world in terms of military power. It's called American Empire. And for those of you who are here this spring, when former Ambassador and National Security Advisor Don Gregg was here, he is the one who hooked me up with the lady who has made the documentary, and it's supposed to be extremely powerful. I think you'll really enjoy it and really learn a lot from it. So I hope you'll come out for that 2 weeks from tonight. Thank you all for coming out tonight.